Lior, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When people talk about investing in physical industries, your name and the Eclipse name come up a lot.
Yeah.
That's a little bit anomalous in this world. Why did you choose to focus in that area?
I mean, for us, it was pretty straightforward. We came from an operating background, building companies and operating companies in those industries before, so it was very obvious to us that that's what we are passionate about. The other thing is came from, although I dropped off from high school, I'm a decent with numbers, and it came from just a fundamental view that the world GDP, call it 120 trillion, 85% of it is in physical industries. So you run the quick math, and when we started Eclipse in 2015, 98.7% of venture capital and growth capital went to enterprise software. The enterprise software combined, it's a $200 billion TAM. And I'm like, 100 trillion versus 200 billion, I like 100 trillion more.
Amazing. And it seems like there's a lot of focus in this area now. And it's sort of, the sexy place to be. And in Washington, D.C., at the inauguration, you see a lot of tech leaders, and it seems very natural and obvious now. It doesn't seem like it's always been that way. What is sort of the history of the interaction between the D.C. world, the government side, and technology and innovation?
It's funny. It's not a new thing at all. Actually, where Silicon Valley started, it's true, by the way, in other countries, in Israel, in Europe, in China, technology actually started by working very closely with the government. The government actually funded the original Silicon Valley dreams, NASA, DOD, again, very true for this country, but true generally. And then I think what happened, the reason that they were so close is because they were working on physical industries, defense, space, manufacturing, and that was very, very close engagement between the government and the private sector. Then what happening with the software world, you had like two kids with a pajama writing some software to manage some HR bullshit, and they made money for themselves, and that's great, but actually they did not impact the GDP at all. And it was like irrelevant for the government. Yep. And I think now what we are seeing back full circle, semiconductor, manufacturing, energy, industrial, defense. This is in the, what governments, as you know, working for the White House, what governments care the most. And the tech sector is meeting that just in the right place. And I just think that train left the station, will never come back.
Yeah.
The connection between the private sectors and the tech and the governments.
Yeah. Certainly when I was in the White House and the National Security Council and the National Economic Council, we spent a lot of time on these issues, but it felt like these worlds were very separate. And it was frustrating because we would say economic security is national security, energy security is national security. And now it seems like, both sides recognize that there's no distinction there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think country that did it well historically, and then lost it a little bit and now trying to come back is China. I think, China used their manufacturing engine as a country to go and build an infrastructure around the world. He wants to build a power plant and you are Congo. China will do a deal with you. By the way, you must use the China construction company. You must use the China equipment. You must use the China lines of credit and banking. And for that, we're going to take your 20 years nickel mine that you have in Congo. So actually, China did a really nice job around that engagement, how they're going to use their physical industries as a currency, as a weapon for their world domination plan. I think what's happening is we, with the new administration, I think, made a couple of amazing points. We took the best in breed and the private sectors, people that the richest man on earth, that turn out he's not building enterprise software, he's building rockets and cars. And he made a fortune by doing that, but show that he actually can use the exact same things that China is using here in the private sector. And I think the new administration making some incredible stride of how the relationship between the private sectors and their ability to use it for the external innovation that US and the allies wants to work on.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point because recently the model has been we promoted innovation, early stage innovation, and then we put up walls. We had export controls. We try to keep it out of the hands of people who we think are not going to use it well. But I think there's an increasing recognition that this deployment side for the United States has to improve. We need to create things, but then deploy. And that's what the Chinese have done well. What are some of the other elements in that deployment? It's not just energy. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, you and I talked a little bit before about what we've been working with the new administration. But I think the reality we're giving to our allies F-35s, and we're giving them weapons, and we're giving them oil, and we're giving them capital. What historically we did not give them is chips and data centers and energy sources and manufacturing capabilities. And that's the new currency. Yeah. And for that, you need, of course, the private sector to build those companies. And I think there is some incredible stories, the Teslas, the SpaceX, the companies that we're building, and many more that are reaching size that is incredible because they're operating in this $100 trillion TAM. You need policy. You actually need policy to work with you of how you export those technologies, because now it's a government to government. The US is doing a deal with the UAE to give them the ability to build a data center. Okay, great. I need chips, and I need GPUs, and I need construction, and I need HVACs, and I need power this data center. So you need the policy to work side by side with the private sectors, and I never been more bullish on the opportunity there.
Yeah, and I do think that in DC, there's a sense of urgency. When I was in the White House, we fought a real uphill battle with our allies around Huawei. We said, you've already got these systems in place, and we want you to rip them out. And to be honest, we didn't have a great alternative. Now we have really great companies across the entire AI ecosystem and the infrastructure that surrounds it, but we need to deploy. And do you think that that urgency is there? And do you think that we can do with the allies what we need to not find ourselves in that Huawei type of situation?
I've never been so hopeful and so optimistic about actually the future of this country. Yeah. I never seen you go now to Washington, D.C., and you feel the entrepreneurship mindset and energy is like competing with Silicon Valley, where I live. And I think it's a new thing. Yeah. So I'm very hopeful. I know nothing about politics. I only know how to build physical companies. So I hope not to get wrong here. But I think there is the incentives are there. And I think President Trump and the administration are truly believing that by having superiority in semiconductors and manufacturing and industrial will help us moving the GDP of the United States and also helping our allies driving their economy. So I'm super bullish.
Yeah. Do you think that we are creating enough of the right kinds of leaders and builders to deploy and do what we need to do in this country?
I mean, the companies that we build are not a good fit for drop-off from universities when you're in the 21. I'm not saying that you cannot do those companies, but these companies build differently. Mm-hmm. You're talking about the physical industries. You're going to build factories. You're going to buy machines. You're going to working on mining minerals. You're going to build rockets. You're going to build a very large data center. And that's required vertical integration. It's not only software. We laugh in Eclipse all the time. We say we're experts in connecting bits and atoms. Yeah. And in the atoms, you cannot fake it. Yeah. Because when you build real shit, it needs to work. I can't send like a one line of code. And I'm like, yeah, I put a patch on the data centers that the HVAC didn't work. HVAC didn't work. The whole data center fried.
And you've actually done this. You lived in China for a year. You've told me stories about flying back and forth to Guadalajara on tiny planes. What do you think you learn from sitting in your seat now, from those experiences, really sort of being deep in the weeds as a builder?
I think it's incredibly hard to build these companies, but the reward is you look in front of you how to impact society. You can create jobs. And when something that I'm obsessed about manufacturing, it's a circular economy. When you build the manufacturing, you actually, by definition, impact the construction industry of that place, impact the energy service providers, of course, employments. You actually have a first-hand impact on society. And I'm willing to take the pain of building those companies because the size of the prize is so incredible, and your ability to influence not only two guys that created a fintech for whatever and they make money for themselves, and that's fine. You actually have the ability to create $1 trillion of market cap businesses and impact society. That is just, for me, that's what I wake up every morning.
Yeah, and look, it's really interesting. When I was in the White House, we had meeting after meeting where we'd say, how are we going to compete with China over the long term when they're dominant in this vertical on manufacturing, they're dominant in this vertical, we can't compete on scale, we can't compete on cost. And we didn't accept that as an answer, but that was sort of the mainstream consensus view.
Yeah.
And you didn't accept that answer, and the founders that you work with didn't accept that answer. Why is that wrong? What are we able to do now that is to change that narrative?
Yeah, I lived in China in 2013, running a factory in a city called Zhuhai, and I had this translator guy, Tony, walking with me in the SMT lines, and I got super frustrated by an answer of the guy that's running the SMT lines, and I asked him, Tony, why it cannot be win-win? And he's like, Mr. Lior, win-win in China is China win twice. And, that's kind of struck me because I was like, God, I totally missing here the main point. It's a competition. We actually compete against them. They're on the other side. And like in a basketball, I want to beat the shit out of that team. The one thing that is happening now that it's amazing, the game is changing. Because I can use technology in physical industries. And the two things that manufacturing needs is scale and skill. Mm-hmm. And I actually can get scale through automation and robotics, and I can get skill through software. And by combining those two is the first time that China's main economical engine, manufacturing, is on the defense, it's not on the offense. Because if I can move manufacturing to the United States and move it to a domicile, a domestic operation, I actually pulling GDP out of China to the country that I built it. And I couldn't do it in the last 50 years because technology was just not there.
Yeah, certainly in my conversations with the energy team in DC, Chris Wright and Doug Burgum, they get the urgency. We need to have these core pieces around advanced manufacturing, around energy, around all of the key components to allow us to build. And I think that we're moving in that direction. You see this renewed focus on investment in the United States. Bernard Arnault went to France recently, and he said it's really sort of it's cold water being thrown on my face coming back to France from the United States because you feel this energy. I'll keep investing there because they're putting in place all of the pieces that you need.
Yeah, I mean, is anyone here remember? In 4 weeks that there is a $500 billion commitments from Apple, $500 billion commitments from Stargate. Every day, you basically get this incredible announcement of significant amount of dollars that are going to come and invest in physical industries in the United States. This is golden age. Yeah. That's, I think, what President Trump, and you know what, putting politics aside, I think regardless where you are on the aisle, you want to see this country win. And by winning, meaning we need capital, we need talent, and we need scale. And I think it's the first time for many, many, many decades, maybe from post-World War II, that we have that opportunity to go and move the GDP in these countries and the allies countries in a way that has never been done before by innovating with technology in physical industries.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. Both the Biden administration, this has been a bipartisan issue around manufacturing in the United States. People might have different views on what the right incentive packages are, but the core views on what we can do to bring to bear our strengths around innovation and entrepreneurship to drive this renewed reindustrialization in the United States, I think that's a really powerful point, and we're seeing it happen with these announcements every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, Biden had a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was not very different than the new administration. It was focusing on chips and batteries and manufacturing. Again, I think the incentives change maybe, and the new administration are less about green energy, so they're going to call it slightly different. But the goal was the same. Physical industries are going to change by technology. Whoever governments that are going to invest and control are going to have the biggest outcome. And the fact is that the richest person on earth did 2 companies in that space in an industry that used to have very, very little innovation by vertically integrated and the best engineering with the manufacturing, with the supply chain. and we see the outcome, right? It's like a north to $1 trillion market cap, and a north to whatever is now in the private market space, it's $500 billion, or I don't know even what it is right now. It's just the size of those markets are so big. So if you can actually build a company that have a gross margin that looks very different than software, by the way, the multiple you're going to get in the public market are actually better than the software because the TAM is just much more significant. And you, as a digital native business in physical industries, you're just going to trade much better than the peers.
Yeah, look, I think it's exciting because, one thing that Washington, D.C. is very good at is doing things the same way over and over again. And there were, areas like defense and energy where we might have recognized that we weren't doing things in a particularly dynamic way, but we just kept doing them. We had high barriers, tons of regulation, make it really difficult, protect the incumbents. And now we're sort of ripping down all of those walls. You certainly see that in DoD and the mindset. What are some of those sectors that really excite you?
Yeah, I think regulation is one of the things that can kill innovation the most. One of the topics I love the most is nuclear energy, and the ignorance around nuclear energy, it's so sad. It's actually the most green energy that you can produce. And by the way, in the last 100 years, 0 people in the United States die from nuclear energy. 0. Not even 1. Not even 1. So why we're so afraid is just because, it's like this propaganda. I was like, oh, nuclear energy is really bad for you. It's like, everyone wants clean energy at scale, correct? This is the cheapest, cleanest energy. But if you are trying to build before the new administration any nuclear energy, you're going to find yourself in a 20 years project and you will go under. Yeah. So I think, now we are getting in the new governments to be very aligned on policy to support innovation in physical industry. And as a result, I think the outcome, both from a GDP and cost of living and even carbon emission, things that maybe the new administration is not huge in, will be incredible.
Yeah. And I think there's recognition that that's the right path. We used to sit in the G7 and, the Germans who were closing their nuclear power plants would argue against anything that would be supportive of the nuclear industry. And now what are they going to do? They're probably going to turn their nuclear plants back on.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're going to support our innovators around nuclear because we know that these are the answers. And the same thing in defense. We need innovators to be coming up with new technologies, and we're seeing it on the battlefield.
Yeah.
This is how it's happening.
Yeah, as a previous soldier for many years, I'm telling you that in other physical industry, the defense market is changing significantly by technology as well. And there is new opportunities as part of it. And the interesting thing, if you take the stack that a company like Anduril and the approach that they're taking, or a company like SpaceX in the space, or a company like Vulcan in the metal manufacturing space that we build, the stack himself, the tech stack, is actually pretty similar. You're talking about connecting hardware with software, with data, with some AI on top of it, and you vertically integrate as much as you can. When you're successful, you basically continue to eat more part of the stack. So Tesla started by building a car, then they took the battery that they built the car and they built battery packs for energy storage. Then they built the chip that's running the AI for their car. So they launched the FSD and other business models. So I think we're going to see more and more of those companies that are vertically integrated. That's naturally, I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid. That's companies I love to build. But it's just, it's money time.
Have you seen a change? When you've been doing this for a long time, and when you started, everyone wanted to be a computer science major at Stanford, and they all wanted to build SaaS companies. Have you seen an increase in the number of great young entrepreneurs who want to focus on these things?
Best founders in the world wants to build physical industries. There was a funny things that the founder of Fairchild used to say that real men have fabs. And I think real entrepreneurs wants to build real shit. And the new heroes is Elon and Jensen, and they're building real shit.
Yeah. No, it's amazing because now people who are young, who are coming up, they see these amazing guys who have done this now. It's not a dream. They're not all, SaaS companies. They're seeing people who are building rockets, who are building satellite companies, who are building great energy companies. It really must be inspiring for the next generation.
It's inspiring, and we take the Eclipse kids, the team of Eclipse, our kids. We take them every year to see our companies, a few of our companies, and I have 2 daughters, and 8 and 10, and they talk internally at home about, wow, did you see that how that robot manufacturing that drug for cell therapy and how that's actually moved it? I can dream telling my kids I'm doing some agile fucking software. I want them to see how real things is being built. Because that's what will impact their life. Not say that agile software will potentially will not impact their life, but I think more and more people now understanding that the real opportunities and the real outcomes are going to come from physical industries, and that's just bringing the best founders in the world to work on these problems.
That's really exciting. We've talked a bit about, I sort of live in this Washington, D.C. world. In your conversations you're having with senior leadership in D.C., do you feel like this message about how the urgency of deploying and building physical industry is getting through, and that the set of regulations and that sort of mix of policy frameworks to incentivize that is moving in the right direction?
I mean, it's a new thing for me. This is why I'm coming to you to advise every time. I was like, hey, can you translate what exactly they wanted me to do? We've been, 20 times in DC in the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks. So I think people are very, very serious about innovating in those industries. I think the market is moving extremely fast. I think the speed, it's not something that the government is historically was familiar with. And I think I see some great athletes that President Trump and JD is putting next to them to actually be able to keep up. I'm traveling across the world. I just came from Abu Dhabi. I'm flying tonight to Japan. I think leaders in other countries wants to source from US physical industries innovation, like they source F-35s and weapons and some other things historically. I think that train left the station for sure with this administration, but I tell you the truth, Thomas, I don't think it's within next administration after. I do not see this thing going to change.
I agree with you. I mean, when I was in DC, I didn't want to hear from a think tank guy about how to build something. I wanted to hear from a real builder. I wanted to talk to people like you, and from the feedback that I've gotten, the people who I know in the White House on the national security side, they're really, really benefiting, and they're translating that into executive orders and into proposed rulemakings. This connection is real, and I think it, like you're saying, the train's has left the station.
And it goes back to, this is my team. I'm a patriot. I want my team to win. I want my kids to have a better future. I'm not going to be apologetic about it.
Look, I love it, Lior. It's an amazing message. It's been a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thomas, thanks for having me.